Russia's President Vladimir Putin meets with the leaders of several countries, including China. Putin sat down with Chinese leader Xi Jinping during a summit in Uzbekistan, a nation in Central Asia. Rosie Burchard joins us live from Samarkand, Uzbekistan, where that summit took place. Rosie, what do we know about this meeting?
Well, there were more than a dozen or so leaders gathered here in Samarkand, one of the most ancient cities on the planet. But all eyes were on that bilateral meeting between President Xi and President Putin. This is the first time President Xi left China since the beginning of the pandemic. And for President Putin, of course, a bid here to try and show that he still has friends despite those Western sanctions imposed over the war in Ukraine. And Ukraine was a topic discussed by these leaders. Russian President Vladimir Putin told his Chinese counterpart that he highly values China's quote-unquote balanced position on Ukraine. Now, that balanced position, as described by Putin, is basically that China has not condemned Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, but it hasn't given any sort of formal backing either. Beyond that, the Russian President Vladimir Putin said he understands Chinese concerns about Ukraine and that he'll seek to clarify his position. Now, of course, that will raise eyebrows in Washington, in Brussels, in London, in places which have sanctioned Moscow over this invasion of Ukraine, because I'm sure they'll be saying, well, what is there to explain there? What is there to clarify? This is quite clearly an invasion and a brutal war which has now dragged on for several months. And in what might be seen as a bid to try and really impress China here and please his Chinese counterpart, Russian President Vladimir Putin also said that he condemns US quote-unquote provocations in the Taiwan Strait. And there, of course, he is referring to the visit of US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi recently to Taiwan. And that's something which may be music to China's ears, of course, because China was incredibly critical of that visit. And it was, and then many leaders in the West in turn criticised Beijing for what they described as an overreaction when Beijing then launched security drills in the strait near the island. And so this is Russian President Vladimir Putin saying that he's hoping to deepen ties with China and that he wants trade turnover between these two sides to reach record levels by the end of this year. Of course, he is looking for new customers for his oil and gas exports now that those have been sanctioned and have dropped so dramatically from the traditional customers in Europe ever since the invasion of Ukraine.
Right. So looking at this as a bigger picture, what does this mean for Russian President Vladimir Putin, and what does he hope to gain out of it more specifically?
Well, I think he's come here to Samarkand with a hope of trying to get some more support from the countries gathered here, which include China, but also India, Pakistan, and the Central Asian states, including Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, for example. He'd like them to be more supportive of this war in Ukraine. That's something he's unlikely to get because a lot of these states are trying to strike a delicate balance here. They don't want to annoy Russia, but they also would like to, in some ways, some of them keep up friendly ties with the West. I should tell you where I am. We're just a couple of hours' drive from Afghanistan. So, of course, for decades, there was quite a strong US presence in this region, and Uzbekistan and others would like to keep up rather friendly ties. So for Russian President Vladimir Putin, that's likely not going to be what he manages to get formal backing for this ongoing war in Ukraine. But it is an opportunity for him to try and prove and project an image that he is not isolated, that he still has friends despite these Western sanctions and despite those attempts to isolate him for the ongoing war. Meanwhile, for the Chinese president, this comes ahead of a crucial meeting of the Chinese Communist Party, where he'll try and cement his role as one of the most powerful leaders of China in all time. And here in Uzbekistan, it's really seen that he's coming to try and show his role as an international leader, put that in his pocket and take it home and show it to a domestic audience ahead of that really key meeting.
And Rosie, this is the first overseas trip for Xi Jinping since the start of the pandemic. So what does this say about the message China now wants to send about its own domestic stability?
Indeed, and I should say that this region where we are, Central Asia, borders with the Chinese region of Xinjiang, which is, of course, the region in which China is accused by the US and others of widespread human rights abuses against its mostly Muslim Uyghur minority, though that, of course, is an allegation which China denies. And some Chinese government officials are under sanctions from the US, from the European Union and others because of those allegations. Now, with that big key Communist Party conference in mind, Xi Jinping is here making a physical return return to the world stage, trying to show himself really as a world power. And what some of the words he used in this meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin were talking about being a responsible world power. These are two countries with deepening ties, Russia and China. They're looking to more cooperation on energy, but of course they also share a world view to some extent, and a world view which is shaped by reticence toward the United States, particularly frosty relations with the United States that are getting frostier. Of course, in Russia's case, it's really contempt toward the United States. In China's case, it's relations which are getting colder and not going well, getting worse by the day. So this is something which really is bringing these two countries together, and what many analysts are saying is an attempt to really try and tip the global balance of power away from the West.
Yeah. All right, Rosie Burchard reporting live from Uzbekistan. Thank you so much.